Welcome to The Human Element, presented by Whisk. I'm your host, Barb Biden, and in each episode, I sit down with CHROs and senior HR leaders to explore how AI, innovation, and human insight are reshaping the future of HR. We'll explore how technology is reshaping leadership, strategy, and the role of HR by sharing candid stories, practical ideas, and strategic perspectives to help you shape the future. The Human Element is brought to you by Whisk, the leader in agentic HR and creator of Harper, the world's first AI HR generalist. Learn how Harper can resolve up to 80% of routine HR tasks autonomously. Learn more about Whisk at whisk.com. Welcome to The Human Element. Today, I am joined by Preet Michelson, who is the CPO of TMS and Morgan Street Holdings. TMS has a large global presence whose name you may not recognize, but you would recognize them through the goods that they procure for large customers such as Starbucks and McDonald's. So I am thrilled to have you on today and really looking forward to chatting, Preet. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Barb. I'm thrilled to be here today.
So your background is genuinely super interesting. I love a good non-traditional HR background. So you were a CPA, then went into commercialization, and then HR. Does that first chapter still show up in how you lead today?
Oh, absolutely. Look, when I first got out of school with an accounting degree and got my CPA, I started with one of the big four firms, KPMG. The thing that I love the way that it shows up even today is it's so important that HR folks are business people first. So it is critical that we understand how companies make money and that we understand the financial statements, how to read it, how to impact it, and ultimately how to motivate your employees to make a difference there.
Totally. Is that something that you noticed early on would be an edge for you in HR, just having that sort of data first orientation that you would have had coming from a finance background?
Absolutely. This is many years ago, I think HR has really seen a seismic shift away from being purely transactional and into the strategic. But when I first got out of school, HR was very transactional. It was very hiring and firing and benefits, really. And so I thought, gosh, there's so much data that would be powerful in how we interact with employees, how we develop them, how we support them, that could make big differences in how they show up every day and could contribute to our bottom line.
Completely. And so technically you're the CPO at two companies at the same time, right? TMS and Morgan
Yeah.
Street Holdings. What does that actually look like in practice?
Yeah, great question. So we're a privately held company at the top, and we're probably like a little itty bitty baby Berkshire. That's probably being a little generous here. But what we do is we tend to buy and hold companies. It's not the PE model of buying and flipping. So at the holding company, I lead the people team. In addition, we have 4 portfolio companies, and I lead the people team for one of the portfolio companies as well.
Got it. And so I might steal your thunder here because I said in the opening that most people may not know your company name, but they definitely know the products you procure. So TMS makes Happy Meal toys. How cool. And created T-Mobile Tuesdays as well. Does that creative culture that you support in products show up in how you think about people strategy or how it feels to work within the company?
Yeah, it's so fun. It's a creative, fast moving environment because we are very dependent upon consumers and we're impacted by the geopolitical situation, there's just so much going on right now. We're impacted by tariffs because many of the goods that we procure are in Southeast Asia. And so there are clearly tax implications and tariff implications there. But it shows up in our culture because we have a very fun, vibrant, creative environment where we employ everyone from literally toy makers to agency brand specialists that are just brilliant creatives. And so it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
That does sound like a super fun environment, and how cool that you do the Happy Meal toys. I know you are an operator at heart, and I know from our sort of pre-conversation that you inherited a lot of manual HR processes.
Yes.
Someone emails to change their address, been there, done that, right?
Yeah.
Add a dependent, all of these transactional things, and it lands in somebody's inbox. Walk me through some of what you have done or are doing to use AI to fix some of this.
Oh, yeah. Such a great topic right now. AI is ubiquitous, but I just wonder, are we all using it in the best possible way, in the most efficient way? So, one of the things that I noticed when I first came here was that our folks were working really hard, long hours to answer questions that really didn't need a very human touch. So, you mentioned a couple of ones that were quite frequently coming in, like, how do I change my address in the system? How do I add a dependent? But if we want to save our precious time for where an employee might need a complicated leave or where there are some mental health issues or where we can provide services or benefits that will really aid our employee population, that's really where we want to spend our time. So we thought about this in two ways. The first way was we looked at our HCM, which we're actually using SAP SuccessFactors,
Okay.
and they have a
Yep.
tool called Jewel. And we thought, how can we use a chatbot to answer many of these, what we call either tier 0 or tier 1 questions? So similar to the ones we just talked about, like
Hmm.
address changes or dependent additions, et cetera. The problem with doing that is that we didn't have a case management system to log all of these inquiries. So
Right.
inquiries were coming in all sorts of different ways, all channels. We had emails, people would pick up the phone and call members of my HR team. It felt like even things were coming in via paper airplane. I mean, it just,
Sometimes, right?
oh my goodness, all kinds of ways. So the first thing we needed to do was really just write everything down, log it all so that you knew what were you dealing with. We used AI to go in and literally read all of the inquiries that were coming in and then summarize them into buckets of information. So some we could summarize as being purely transactional. Other ones could deal with immigration. They could deal with Family Leave Act issues. They could deal with all sorts of topics. But being able to summarize that was really helpful so that we knew, is this a training exercise? Do we need to educate our workforce more, bring the same questions over and over again? Or were there opportunities where we might need to service our employees in maybe a different way or maybe with different benefits? And so when I say that we really operated in two different ways, it was utilizing Joule to create a chatbot to answer the more transactional questions, but then later using AI to then summarize, how do we go about answering these in more robust ways, and which ones can we leave to the bot to answer?
You totally got me on that one because we've been having this debate as well. And I really think it's centralize, summarize,
Yes.
and then start diving deep. And I think we used to do that the opposite way. I actually been going through this with my own team where the team had been thinking about building workflows for certain subjects, right?
Sure.
That were like the common questions that they believed they were asked. And I was like, wait, like we have this data, right? We
Yeah.
know what thematically we need to focus on. So it sounds like you were ahead of the curve there and thinking about pulling all your tier 0, tier 1, summarizing,
Yeah.
and then being able to focus your attention right on the right things based on thematic data, which is really that piece of it is not new, but the summarizing first so that you can get there faster is like gold. I
It
mean,
is.
you used to not be able to do that. You used to have to think of your ticketing structure and all kinds
Yes.
of things that you don't need to do up front anymore.
Yeah, exactly right. And the fact that we are in over 44 countries and we have a massive global footprint, inquiries were coming to us in three different mailboxes. We had a European EU HR Ops mailbox, what we call APMEA, which is our Asian operations, and then also our NA mailbox. Their inquiries could be very different, and you need to cater to the needs of the workforce in which you operate. So that was very helpful.
Yeah. I'm in the land of mailbox consolidation and so forth, right there with you. How
Yeah.
are you deciding, Preet, on what goes to a bot and what gets the human touch and some more white glove service?
Yeah, great question. Look, anything that would involve purely transactional answers that you're just moving data from one place to another, maybe it's coming out of one system and needs to go into another, that doesn't feel like the employee is seeking personal attention that would require a conversation. They are really needing timeliness and accuracy to get the job done. On the flip side, when it feels like a conversation would be worthy or that you could arrive at different answers or there is a sensitive issue that might deal with an employee's family or the way in which they're working today, those we really save for direct conversation where we might get an expert involved. Maybe it has to do sometimes with immigration and whether they won the lottery or not, or whether it's going to require more deep dive, or there are certain FMLA situations that can be quite complicated that really does deal with family situations where a human touch not only demonstrates HR prowess, but also some loyalty and the fact that we can emphasize the fact that we are able to give that kind of more deep dive, better answer, I think also caters to the fact that we are a privately held company, and that works to our advantage.
I totally agree. I'm very curious. When you did all of that analysis on the ops side, is there anything that changed about what you thought the problem was, or maybe thematically what you thought would bubble up and then something else was a really big theme? What did you learn when you looked at all of that data and did the summary?
Yeah. One of the biggest things I learned is there's oftentimes several questions that come in through multiple employees, and it just requires some training. So we actually implemented a new HCM about 2 years ago. That's a really big deal for a company to implement a brand new human capital management system. SAP is a global company. They can be quite complicated at times. They're trying to simplify your operations. But to get the adoption and really go through the change management is very difficult. It's an expensive proposition because the HCM itself is expensive, but it also requires a lot of human capital hours to pour into it to refine the way that you go about consuming data or just understanding what does the system do. And so what we found was once we summarized the types of inquiries that were coming in was much of it could be solved with just better training either first-time managers or training employees as to what is available to them. And so that was a pretty neat finding that we could work on right away, opposed to needing a long, drawn-out solution.
Immediately actionable,
Exactly.
completely. I know that you also leaned into AI for performance evaluations.
Yes.
So that's every employee's most dreaded process.
Yeah.
Tell me what you did there and what actually happened through that process.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk about that because for some reason it really is such a dreaded process. And I think people just loathe having to look back a whole year and having to remember what they did and that sort of thing. So what we did was we actually started at the very front end. We started with goals at the very beginning of the process and said, okay, hey AI, this is what my job description is. And here are some of the things that I want to accomplish next year. Very simple. And we put that into a closed AI environment and said, suggest some goals for me. And again, limited 2, 3, 4 goals at the most, nothing that would be a recreation of your job description, which is not really helpful. So we curated some prompts for employees to make it easier on them so they wouldn't have to spend time doing that. And they loved it. From that, we also developed a goal library so people could go in and say, oh yeah, that applies to me and the job that I have. And then they can tailor that to things that are relevant to their specific role. Furthermore, we also really simplified our mid-year process to simply say, are you on track or off track? And if somebody was off track, that's where we wanted to dive a little deeper. And there too, we allowed for managers to utilize AI to say, if they could quickly put in a few prompts as to what was either where an employee may not be hitting the mark or they could be doing something differently, an easier way to present that to the employee was very helpful to use AI in that realm. And then lastly, as you look backward through the year and you're developing your year-end review, we used AI in 2 forms. One was actually it was AI plus our system. One was to, again, help you look through your emails, through your content on your computer, which is fascinating that they can go through decks and emails and collateral that you've maybe created and said, oh, here are the top 10 things that you've done throughout the year. That's just mind blowing that it can do that. And then again,
it's amazing.
It's amazing. And
if you think about the things that it'll help you remember that you forgot from 11 and a half months ago.
Yes. As a matter of fact, for my team, because my team is so geographically dispersed, I'm even using AI to do quarterly accomplishments to say, as a team, what we have accomplished. And we're documenting those and really getting them out to our workforce. And it's really proven quite helpful. Oh, wow. HR is really showing up in a different way. But anyway, back to the year end reviews. The other thing that we're doing is with a click of a button, we're doing mini 360 reviews and just asking others to opine on performance so that when we come back to do a year-end review, it's not just a manager having to create the full review for the employee. We're also taking into account other stakeholders and how they're feeling and what was accomplished for and with them.
That's great. And what has engagement been like with some of these new processes compared to the old way?
Yeah, I just shared this with our workforce yesterday at our first global town hall of the year, and I'm pleased to say that our numbers have never been higher. So in terms of adoption, we had a 96% completion rate for year-end reviews because we just closed out our comp cycle for prior year for 2025. That's unheard of. We also had a 97% adoption rate for managers hosting one-on-one conversations with their employees. Feedback is a gift. I've always said that, but when you can actually sit down with an employee with some substantive comments about how you are intentionally wanting them to be better or helping them to do their job or providing feedback in a way that is authentic, my goodness, you'll see your culture and engagement scores rise. And we have seen that. And I'm really proud of that.
And for any HR leader who's done this, engagement in that process in a large company in
Yeah.
excess of 95% is unheard of.
It's
Obviously,
a
we all would want 100%, but we know that even there's like circumstances that probably draw it down to 95%. It's like people who were on leaves and the leave started in the middle of the process. Like you probably effectively got 100%. That's amazing.
It
So,
was a lot of effort. It really
yeah.
was. I really do believe that employees benefited from having the direct one-to-one conversations with their managers, and we're better for it, for having those straightforward conversations.
Yeah. And you said that the team noticed HR kind of showing up differently. Do you feel
Yeah.
like your team noticed that and that was felt from even just like a morale boost from launching this process that everyone dreads to, HR launched this, right? And people being really surprised. How did that impact your team?
Oh man, in so many positive ways. It was hard at first because creating processes, particularly with the new HCM, new ways of working, that's hard, right? And people have day jobs. They're having to go back and relearn maybe certain processes or how we do things. Ultimately, though, it was a big time saver in the end. The other thing I want to comment on is I talk a lot about our brand. What is our brand, both as a human as well as a function? And it matters as to how people see you. And the way that I describe it is in the push and the pull. When I'm having to push my way into a meeting or at the proverbial table, that feels very different than when you really are a strategic partner to the business and they say, oh, wait, hold on. Don't start the meeting yet because Preet's not at the table yet, or my team is not at the table. And that sort of pull effect of when they want HR to be there because you are seen as a strategic partner to them is a massive shift. And to me, indicates a big win. And my team started to feel that shift in how they were being looked at, how their services were being utilized. The conversation shifted away from being purely transactional and saying, what do you think about this? How can I approach this a little differently? The questions changed dramatically.
It makes all of the work that our teams do, I think, feel worthwhile, right? When you can
Yeah,
have, when
absolutely.
you realize how you're showing up and being received differently, more
Yes.
with that pull by the business, especially the work that it takes to get there to launch some of these things that we've talked about. So I want to flip back a little bit to your earlier career, right? Data, numbers. You're
Yeah.
now watching HR leaders try to use AI, some of whom don't have that same foundation. What are you seeing in terms of potential kind of missteps as folks are making their first forays into AI?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think right now we're just getting up that adoption curve, right? Like you're trying to integrate Even something as simple as ChatGPT into your life, right? I think mistakes are where we lean too heavily on AI to solve all of our problems. It's not, you do need to have a base level understanding. It's not always 100% accurate. So you can't just take it as the gospel. And then lastly, we have to remember we're dealing with humans. I say to all of my leaders today, any CEO, you cannot bring me one problem that doesn't involve people. And so, how we approach the solutions for the things that they're tackling always comes back to being human. And AI is not going to solve for that, right? I think we need to remember to be authentic and utilize many different tools, which does include AI, but that we, at the heart of it, are we keeping that human at the center of what we're solving for?
Completely. Like, I think our teams are very safe if we remember the human aspect and the place where we can uniquely add value,
Yes.
leveraging AI so that we can show up more as our unique human selves. I have felt like through this conversation, Preet, that in a couple ways we're leading parallel lives. So I
Oh,
could talk
good.
all day about goals and some of those things that we were trying because I'd love to pick your brain even more. But this time always flies by. I'm going to
Yeah.
move us into our lightning round. So just quick hit answers on these ones. What is one tool that you think every HR leader should be using right now? Maybe not the one that they're talking about, the one that's actually working.
I think everybody should get familiar with Claude. It's not as well known as like a Copilot or Gemini or ChatGPT. Claude is fantastic. It's a little
Life
bit more
changing, I
accelerated.
think.
It
Yeah,
really
it will
is.
change your work life.
Yes. So use it. Don't be afraid. And especially, I want to see women be more aggressive with the adoption and just trying something.
Totally. There are some great resources out there too, like self-guided learning that make even Claude Code really
Yes.
accessible, and
Yes.
some great female leaders doing work in this space too. What do you think is the biggest myth about AI in HR operations? The thing that people keep saying that you feel like maybe just isn't true?
I think when it comes to HR operations or even TA operations, people think that AI is the end all be all. It's going to solve all your problems. You still need that human element to solve problems. What it does do for you, though, it allows you to save time and allows you to work on them more strategic. For TA operations, when we're trying to crank out offers or we're trying to source the right candidate for whatever job we're looking for, those are fantastic. You can get answers in seconds, literally. But then what does that allow you time to do? It allows you to maybe ask questions that might be more thoughtful to get maybe the right candidate for the job. One way that I used AI was even looking for a C-level talent, matching up the JD of the job, their really robust CV, and then asking AI, where are the gaps in this? Where are the towering strengths in this CV? And then what questions should I ask? It
Mhm.
was really powerful. So there are areas where we can utilize the transactional aspect of things just to save time so that we can be smarter when we're using time that is required for us to lean in, particularly for talent sourcing.
For sure. So, your CPA self, your consultant self, or your CPO self, which version of you shows up the most in a super hard people decision?
I have to tip my hat to the CPO role first. I love it. I literally jump out of bed every morning. I tackle problems, certainly being data driven, but human first. I try to be as empathetic as I can, especially in today's world, given what's just going on in all corners of the earth. It feels like we just don't know what people are battling behind the scenes. And I think ultimately we have people who want to do good work and be proud of what they do. And if we can bring that to the forefront and emphasize their towering strengths, we'll all be better and it'll just be a better environment in which to work.
Completely. Last one, finish this sentence for me. The HR leaders who will matter most in the next decade are the ones who blank.
The ones who will be empathetic, the ones who will be solution oriented, and the ones who use data, including AI, to make smart decisions that also take into account their prior experiences that keep the employee at the center of what you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Preet. I
Okay.
try so hard to capture, and I was like frantically note taking. I don't know if you caught me
That's
over here
okay.
doing that. I try to capture a couple of takeaways from every
Yeah.
guest. And so I think I've got some nuggets here that are great. So we are working. The first one is we're working so hard and sometimes on the most transactional things, right? So how do we save our human touch for things that matter? I loved the question that you asked. Does the employee seem to be seeking a personal touch or some level of attention, or
Yeah.
what they need timeliness and accuracy, right? And
Yeah.
the things that are personal attention, obviously human touch goes there, and the
Yeah.
things that are most suitable for AI first is
You
the
got it.
latter. Definitely number two is all of the work that you did on goals. So my note is like goals, right? But like goal setting and like setting goals, but also
Yeah.
helping managers when they've got team members who are maybe having difficulty achieving goals throughout the quarter, how to have
Yeah.
those tougher discussions and redirecting, that sort of thing.
Exactly.
But anything that gets 95% plus engagement on performance reviews had to be a takeaway. So goals, everybody,
Yes.
for sure. And then I like the push versus pull that you talked about as well, is just thinking about the ways that we can move our teams
Yeah.
and move HR from push. So this idea of pushing yourself into a
Right.
meeting to being that strategic player where there is a pull, right? Where it's like, you're not going to
Exactly.
start the meeting without Preet there, or without Barb there, or
Yeah.
without anyone on our team there, because we are an integral part of what's going on there. So those were awesome takeaways. Thank you so much for all of the wisdom that you shared. Like I always do, we always leave our guests with the last word. What do you want the HR leader who just listened to us talking today to go and think about on their drive home?
I want our HR leaders to be bold. I don't want us to be in the background or sitting at the edge of the table. Sit in the center. Take a bold role in conversations, in the way that leaders, in the way that companies make decisions. Have an opinion, be well read. I rely on my data-driven approach because I think data lends credibility. And I think HR leaders need that. We need that, both credibility and the respect in the room. And we are getting it because, goodness, just getting through the pandemic and now evolving to the position that we're at now, I think more and more companies are realizing the power that really sits with the HR leader in the way that we can sway an employee base with the decisions, the processes, the systems that we use. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
So great. Be bold, friends. So thank you, Preet, for coming on. It was so great to chat with you this morning.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Barb.
Thank you for joining us on The Human Element, presented by Whisk. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow The Human Element wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Barb Biden. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.